Hello, and welcome to the Pixelated Sausage Show. Hi. How is everyone doing? Hopefully, well, I am, of course, your host, Mark Kuj. Nez, hi. I've got a lot of games to talk about, I dabbled in another one earlier today that I will talk about as well. But to get to those already, because there wasn't really a whole lot of news or anything that piqued my interest, I said to myself, you know what I'm going to start doing? I'm going to be bookmarking news stories that do pique my interest, that I want to talk about, so that I have something to talk about before getting into the games I've been playing, so that there's something for this early part of the episode, as opposed to other things that I want to throw into a more of Patreon weekly update type of thing. I was thinking to myself, you know what I should bring back? The sausage dump. Long time listeners will remember the sausage dump. That was a short-lived podcast, off-topic podcast that existed for maybe not even 10 episodes. But I thought, maybe I'll bring that back as a Patreon exclusive little thing where I talk about updates to the site, thoughts and whatnot that don't really have a place for anywhere else, that don't have a place. That's something that might happen, but news-wise, there's some studio closures, some disbandments, more sad stuff, things to expect of this year, but nothing really big that struck me as, I want to talk about this. So we're just going to get to what I've been playing and all that good jazz. And that jazz includes A Quiet Place. Oh, also, I am not going to be sticking with the Steam description thing. I immediately remembered why I have never stuck with that. So you're just going to get me and my horrible descriptions of what games are. But the games for today's podcast include, given the spooky season, some of them make sense. A Quiet Place, The Road Ahead. The Bridge Curse 2, The Extrication, not The Extraction. I was reading that as The Extraction all this time until right now. The Unexpected Quest. Arrow 2? Is that how I'm supposed to say that? Arrow, Aero 2. All one word, the 2 is even part of the word. Purpose, 1951. Creepy Tale, Some Other Place. The Last Shot, To the Moon. And the game I played a little bit earlier today, got a code for it, was It's Only Money. So that's a lot. This may be the most in a single episode ever, but in a long time for sure. And we're going to start with The Quiet Place, The Road Ahead. So, to not talk about the game just yet, The Quiet Place cinematic universe is one I am not the biggest fan of. I have only seen the first movie and a little bit of the second. And I think there's good in that first movie in terms of the filmmaking, the way it's shot, the way it looks, the way it sounds. It's a very well-made movie. But where it lost me was in its universe and how everything works. I don't believe there's consistency with the hearing ability of the monster. It just did not work for me. It lost me in terms of how everything works. I think it's a neat idea, but in execution, I didn't completely buy it. And that comes into play a little bit in the game because I played through the first 2 areas. I got through the hospital, and I think it looks good and plays well, runs well, playing on Xbox. But there are gaming elements of it that really take me out of the experience. In the same way that, as much as I really, really love The Last of Us, there were parts where the gaminess of it took me out of the experience and kept me from being fully immersed in it. I've talked about this every time I've talked about The Last of Us in the past, but one of the things that took me out of that game most was every time you got to an area and then you saw bottles and bricks scattered all over the place, you knew that you were either going to be having an encounter then, or you were going to backtrack at some point and have an encounter later. Regardless of when it was going to happen, you knew you were going to interact with either human scumbags or clickers or something in that area. Otherwise, there would be no need, no reason to put these distraction items all over the place. They're only there if you're going to have a need for them. And the only reason why you would have a need for them is if you're going to have an encounter. And that awareness took me out of the game a smidge. I don't think it did for most people, because a lot of people love that game and they never talk about that. But for me, that was a negative. In A Quiet Place, The Road Ahead, the way in which the game works, based a lot around sound, obviously, because the monster can't see you, it hears you. There are all these things you have to worry about. What's on the ground? Are there leaves on the ground? Is there glass on the ground? Are there objects on the ground? You want to avoid all these things to not make a sound. How fast are you walking? Are you walking on those bad things? Are you walking on sand? You play an asthmatic character who has to deal with anxiety and asthma attacks as well. And that comes in place when you're in situations where you're up against the monster. And I think that is kind of neat. But what takes me out of the experience, the ability to be immersed in it, fully immersed in it, is in the hospital, for instance, and in the first cabin you're in, there are leaves scattered all over the ground. How they got in there, I don't know. It's not a busted up old cabin with a bunch of holes in the ceiling where leaves could have fallen in, and why they're all over the place. And no one at any point said, maybe we should try and clean this up. It just doesn't make any sense to me. But in this hospital, there is shit all over the ground. There are random cans that are just in the middle of hallways and in areas where you have to walk around them and avoid them. And that kept coming up to the point where I couldn't not think about it and how it didn't make any sense. Why are people leaving cans where people could easily just trip over them? Are people trying to trap other people or get them to stumble and get killed? I don't understand it. You're also pregnant in the game. There's story stuff and story drama happening, which is fine, whatever. But all of the gaming elements really took me out of it. It doesn't seem like it's going to be a hard game either. I saw the monster and it's pretty easy enough to avoid it. You have your flashlight, which always amuses me in these games because in real life, flashlights do not deplete batteries as quickly as they do in video games. In video games, it's insane how fast a flashlight will eat some batteries. These must be the cheapest, not even dollar store brand batteries in the world. But it it just the game stuff took me out of it, and I wasn't scared at all. It was just, all right, we're doing the thing, we're sneaking around, we're being very aware of what's on the ground because people leave shit all over the place. There are things about this hospital and story stuff where they were putting up mattresses against the windows and the walls to slightly insulate them so that you could talk in whispers in rooms. And I don't believe that would actually. I don't understand the monster and how good its hearing is. Can it hear you from 500 feet away if you're talking? Like, what? How does the fucking thing work? How good is its hearing? That's what I really, really want to know. Has there ever been any explanation out there that clearly defines the capabilities of the monster in terms of its hearing and how good it is at hearing stuff? Because there are instances where it feels like, okay, well, that monster heard this shit from hundreds and hundreds of feet away, like in the opening of the first movie where the kid has the toy rocket. And sure, that thing is loud in a quiet area, in a quiet place, you could say. But those things move fast, and it takes a bit of time for. I mean, I guess in the silent thing, you'd probably hear that from quite a far, even a normal person. I want to like A Quiet Place. I want to like the universe, but it doesn't exactly make sense to me. It feels like a monster that shouldn't have completely ruined the world's ecosystem and everything. It doesn't feel like an alien invasion or something that should have been as significantly impacting as it was. But the game is okay. If you're into the universe, I'm sure you'll probably get enough out of it, but wasn't doing a whole lot for me. Then The Bridge Curse 2, the Extrication. This is another first person, and the Quiet Place game is a first person horror game. So is The Bridge 2, Bridge Curse 2, where you play a handful of characters. And I don't know if they're, because I haven't finished it, if they're all revolving around this singular case, this thing that happened in the past at the school, this murder, this mysterious murder. But in the first story, with the first character, you're playing a journalist, a reporter, who's investigating this area. And the second story, you are a student director who is filming a short video with a few friends, and shit happens. The thing about it is that it's a lot of tedium and looking around, getting exposition at the start of a character's section, with various times where it goes to cutscenes, in-game cinematics that take away agency from you, and you're just watching the story unfold in a way that is, it really kills the pacing. I haven't played a game where I've put the controller down as much as I have in this game in a while, because every time I would initiate some kind of cutscene, I had no idea how long it was going to take, and I knew it was not going to immediately take me out into a gameplay heavy section, so I would put the controller down. see what these characters are saying. I was like, oh, all right. I wish this game had the original voice acting in its original language with subtitles, because the English voice acting is all over the place and sometimes really doesn't fit a character. There's a cop who seems to be of an older age in the first area, and the voice for them does not fit at all. But when you're going around looking at various things, getting information, it's fine. And then when you reach a part where you're dealing with some kind of ghostly figure, and in the first area at least, I haven't gotten to that part in the second, you have this lantern which allows you to get through extra spooky, smoke-covered obstacles and find some extra clues, but also allows you to push back the ghost or whatever is chasing you once before it needs to recharge. It's basically a singular lifesaver. When you realize that that's how it works, the game becomes, even for someone like me who is a big old scaredy cat baby, incredibly easy, because you don't have to worry about dying, because this thing will save your life no matter what when it's fully charged. So when it's fully charged, you can go around, you can run around, the ghost will catch up to you, but who cares? You'll hit it with your lantern, stun it for a little bit, and then you can find a new hiding spot, let it recharge, and then make more progress. You don't have to worry about ever dying, because that thing is a failsafe, the lantern. So that took away all the scares from the game. So you add the poor pacing and the lack of any kind of real fear, and a story that wasn't doing it for me, in part because the performances weren't that great, but also the pacing. Some of these characters are weird too. The one dude in the second area with a giant mustache. What's it? That's a big ass mustache. That is a huge, insane, is that real mustache on that guy. But it was fine. There's nothing inherently bad about it, but if I were to pick between the two, A Quiet Place or The Bridge Curse 2, I would continue playing A Quiet Place. And I might still play through A Quiet Place just out of curiosity, because I do think it at least looks nice. Characters are, in any kind of horror game, characters are where those games tend to fall a little bit flat. They don't. I think environments are a lot easier to do, visually speaking, which will be evident by a game in a little bit. But that is The Bridge Curse 2, the Extrication. Next is the Unexpected Quest, which is this real-time type strategy, weird level-based game, where the first two are very, very quick, trying to give you an idea of what you're doing. And then the second one expands the level a lot, because the first two are just a single screen area, no scrolling. And then the third level opens it up quite significantly. What I don't like about it is that it's incredibly easy, incredibly tedious, and incredibly linear. So what you're doing is you're in control of these dwarves, and you are collecting resources and then building new buildings that allow you to do more stuff, hire more dwarves or more soldiers to attack zombies and other monsters as you're moving through an area, because the dwarves can't fight. And what's weird about it, and what makes it so tedious, so it's not an open area where you can really decide how you want to handle a situation, how you have some agency with what you focus on resource-wise a little bit, but really you're just moving through a level in a very linear fashion, and you clearly have to do certain things in order to progress. And in some cases, there'll be an area where you can build something, but it's not a building you choose. It's just, okay, when you have enough of these resources, you will build this here. But what makes it extra tedious is that with resource gathering, for instance, if you have a few buildings, manufacturing resources at the beginning of a level, so you're creating pumpkins and wood and just those two, for instance, you can't leave 2 workers behind to collect those resources on their own while you focus on other characters and moving them forward. You have to keep going back down and clicking on the resources to tell your characters to pick them up yourself every single time. So there's no kind of automation in that sense. And that really makes the game incredibly tedious, because you might be up the screen quite a bit doing some stuff, but you need to get these resources, so you have to keep going back down and saying, okay, go collect these things, and you're constantly moving back and forth in a way that is so annoying that I bounced off it rather quickly because of that. So I just think I don't know who the game is for. If this is kind of an attempt to introduce people to these mechanics, since it is so simple, so linear, so easy, there's no real challenge to any of it. In later levels, you have chests that you can put items in that you can carry over between levels. It's just there's no real thought that you have to put in any of it. So maybe later levels will open up more, but its introduction does not leave me expecting anything of that nature. Then Arrow 2 is a rhythm-based game with electronic club music type of library. That's not really my jam. The music, I played the first 5 levels and did not jam out to any of the songs in it. But the gameplay is this weird mixture of Tempest kind of and Res style combat, where whenever enemies pop on the screen, you move your cursor over them while holding the fire button like in Res, and then you let go to attack them. There is a bit of a bar that is moving back and forth when you are attacking someone, and if you let go when it's in the hot zone, whatever you want to call it, you'll do extra damage. But the Tempest-like rhythm side of the gameplay feels very reminiscent of what you would do in a VR rhythm game, especially thinking back to Synth Riders, which I loved, where you are holding the cursor in, and I say cursor, I'm playing this with the gamepad, I'm playing on an Xbox, but you are holding the cursor where the note essentially is playing, and it'll adjust up and down in this circular space that you can rotate around. And it just doesn't feel good with a gamepad. It feels very much like this VR type experience, VR type gameplay that's been put onto a gamepad, and it doesn't feel nearly as good as it would in VR. It's very generous with when there's a slight change in the movement of the line up or down, that it'll just auto do it so that you don't have to be super perfectly accurate. But it wasn't satisfying rhythm gameplay. Just kind of like, oh, I'm rotating around this area, but I'm not feeling in line with the music. There are instances where you'll have a lot of broken lines in repetition, and I only bring that up because then the screen will flash like crazy. So if you have any issues with that, maybe don't play it. But I wasn't enjoying the music, and the gameplay didn't do anything for me. Visually, it's not that striking, so it just was a kind of bland rhythm game. Purpose 1951 is a indie game with a pretty environment that really reinforces and makes me believe that doing foliage and trees, we're just at a point where anyone can make that look good, I think. Because everything else in this game is not as nice looking. The humans, when you see humans in the world, don't look that great. In the first area, you have frogs that are hopping around, but they're very simple models, and the way they hop around looks like someone is there's no real, there might be ever so slight animation to it, but it more so looks like somebody has taken this frog asset, clicked on it with their mouse, and is just raising it up and down, raising it up and down, raising it up and down. It doesn't feel like a frog that's hopping around. It feels like someone manipulating this frog model up and down. But the story of Purpose 1951 is of a retired doctor, I believe, who's reflecting on their life. And they do this through narration that kills the entire thing. Because the narration is so sterile, so there's no nuance to the vocal performance. There's no emotion, there's no nothing. So I feel nothing listening to it. It feels very doctory in that sense, but they'll be talking about certain patients or people in a way where there's no varying in inflection, or it's just a very kind of, I don't know the exact word I'm looking for, but what you would expect audiobook of a textbook to sound like, where they don't want a lot of variation. They want it to be very samey. The whole, it just, there's nothing there. There's no substance. There's no nuance. There's no feeling. It's just a very empty performance. Sans one time, the end of the first chapter, where your character, because you first are just walking around this foresty area, and you're following this person on the bike, and that person ends up being you. And when you transition to the one where you're on the bike, where you're then just biking around this area and this little, not cabin, but this little building, and the biking is just, it feels a little bit different than walking. You can still bike through bushes. It doesn't really matter. But the vocal performance is this very just unchanging thing until the end of that area, where you say something along the lines of, "Oh, is this really hot? Oh, I'm literally on fire." And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? I look down. I'm not on fire. Sun's not beating down. Well, where did this sudden influx of emotion come from? The building's not on, there's nothing on fire anywhere. What are you talking about? And then it ended and moved on to the next chapter. I was like, what the fuck was that? It's weird. But it's a narrative experience, first person type of walking simulator that, I mean, the narrative did not grab me, in large part because the writing is whatever, but mostly because that performance did nothing for me. That is Purpose 1951. Next is Creepy Tale, Some Other Place. This is a adventure game where you're going around. You go into a wooden a hole in a fucking tree or something at the beginning. I can't remember. And then you end up in this creepy place, and you're just doing standard adventuring type stuff of interacting with some characters, finding objects to progress the story in the game. And it's all standard stuff that was fine. The art, there's some nice stuff to the art, but gameplay wise, there wasn't a lot of creativity to the puzzles. It didn't really rack my brain. There's not a whole lot story wise going on. It's very minimal. There's not a lot of talking because you're dealing with a lot of these creatures who can't really say anything. I got to an area now where I'm dealing with some gnome-like creatures who can talk, but there's nothing really of substance happening there. Looks all right, but it didn't do anything to grab me. And then the last shot is kind of the same vein, but with a more ugly aesthetic, modern aesthetic, slightly Simpsons-looking character design, with some ugly character designs, with a bit more of a mixture between. It's much more linear because in Creepy Tale, you are doing more back and forth, classic adventuring where you're finding this object here, and then you have to do something that'll move this character away or distract this one character so that he can go over here and get this object so that he can come back and open up this thing, and then you do this other thing that gets this character to come here, and then they'll give you something that you can use on this door so that you can open it and move forward, and so on and so forth. The last shot is much more of a linear type of platformer with some adventuring type things where you are just platforming like you do from left to right, jumping around, getting through areas, pushing boxes and whatnot to allow you to reach new areas. And then you'll hit a character who has something you need and you have to do something for them, but it's all in that area. It's all in this linear path. And because of that, the platform doesn't feel good. The puzzles are even less thought out. The game doesn't look that great. The story, from what I can tell, is you trying to get back to your lady friend. And you every now and again get these little story snapshots that really show how bad the character design in the game is. The environments look all right, but the character designs are ugly. But that's the last shot. Then the last few, To the Moon, is a game I've talked about many times in the past, and the only reason why it's being brought up now is because it has finally made its way to Xbox and PlayStation, which is wonderful news because it is one of my favorite games of all time. I adore it. And it being in more places, in front of more eyes, is always a good thing. And I hope with this, the rest of the games in the series find their way to consoles as well. But if you don't know what To the Moon is, it is a very story-centric game. There are gameplay elements in it, some traditional classic type of adventuring, finding information about about certain things so that you can progress the story, and then some mini game type things. All I'll say gameplay wise is that there is nothing about To the Moon from a gameplay standpoint that makes it worth playing. It is the narrative and the incredible soundtrack music that makes it such a memorable, affecting, emotional experience. But the story, I don't want to give any specifics, but it's about this company. But you start off as these two doctors, I guess you'd call them. I guess they're doctors who go and with people who are on their deathbeds are just about to move on to whatever comes after life. I'm not here to talk about heaven, hell, what there is, what there isn't, what you believe, what I believe, none of that. But these doctors come to people who are on their deathbed and then take their wishes and implant these memories in them so that they can have these memories just before they're about to pass away in these different lives in a very kind of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind type of way, except that was more about removing memories, and this is about giving people these memories, but only in these very specific situations because of what you're doing and putting in these new memories. And that's the basic gist of the story. But the old man who is on his deathbed that you are going to give memories, his wish is to go to the moon. That is all you know. And you have to figure out why that's what he wishes for. And over the course of the game, you learn it's just a very beautiful story with an incredible soundtrack, and I can't recommend it highly enough. It is just it doesn't feel that great moving around and all of that, but it's a beautiful story. It's one of my favorite games of all time. And when I booted it up just to check out how it was on Xbox, because I'll probably, now that it's on Xbox, finally get around to that second run of it, I started tearing up at the title screen, hearing the music, seeing the title. I was just like, oh God, this game. It's wonderful. It's almost in my top 10. It was in my top 10 for a while, but then I bumped it out because I said to myself, I love the music, I love the story, but like I said, from a gameplay standpoint, it's not really doing anything at all. So, if you need some kind of gameplay hook with your games, if that is what you come to games for, obviously this is not for you. But if that is not essential, and you can put that aside for a great story, I highly recommend To the Moon. Then the last one is It's Only Money, which just got code for and just hit 1.0 on PC, and the game pegs itself as, what if Nintendo made a GTA game and something. I don't remember what they're doing, and they didn't release it or some other crap. But that only holds true in that it is a more cartoony, kid-friendly aesthetic visually, but it is in no way what a GTA game would be like if Nintendo made it, because it is still incredibly crass and juvenile with its humor like GTA. But even more, the way I would describe this game is that it's kind of like, what if the Running with Scissors developers, the developers of the Postal series, decided to make a third-person GTA-like game with a more cartoony, polygonal-ish aesthetic that feels in line with stuff It doesn't look like a Roblox, but it feels like it is in that area, and made it like it feels like Goat Simulator, kind of, but GTAified with humans instead of goats in this silly world with silly things to do, silly characters, and silly adult crass humor, like in the very beginning, early ons, when you were driving a tractor to get away from the cops, and then you run into some parade podium thing going on for senior citizens that has this giant thing that you run into that says something along the lines of "We love balls," something like that. That is not a Nintendo thing, all right? You could say that, what if Nintendo's not going to make anything where they joke about balls or anything sexually. No, it's not going to happen, all right? You can say that, oh, what do you want? Because it's a cutie looking game, but no. But the story is the mayor has decided that anyone without a job gets thrown into this hole, into the underworld. And that happens to you because he takes all of his employees at his factory and says, hey, actually, you know what? Fuck all y'all. You're fired. Get in the hole. Sucks to be you, I guess. And so you get dumped in this hole, and the beginnings of the game after your little introduction are about you wanting to get out of there. And I'm sure you'll get back up top and be able to do things. But I only played a little bit of it, PC only right now. Don't know if there are any plans for consoles, but it's a pretty janky experience. It may have hit 1.0, but it's still rough around the edges. One, don't try and play it on Steam Deck, because I tried to do that and it didn't just not work. It hard crashed my Steam Deck. Hard crashed it. And when I say hard crashed it, what I mean is it completely turned off my Steam Deck when I tried to boot it. It just lost its mind. And then I heard my Steam Deck turn off everything. It just was, oh, you completely killed my Steam Deck. All right, I'm not going to try this again. So I played it on PC with a controller, and it has full controller support, but the controller implementation needs some work. It's finicky. It's very finicky. The default sensitivity for the stick movement, for camera movement, insane. It feels like a mouse at fucking 24,000 MPS or whatever the hell it is. It's just like, all right, this is not going to work. Performance-wise, it's okay. It's okay. But then there are crazy physics things that happen that are kind of funny, but definitely can't be intended, where I tapped a construction sign, a road sign, when I was driving around. And then it just sent the thing flying and spinning around. And when it eventually stopped pinballing around this area, it still kept spinning. It was forever spinning now. But I do see potential in it. There's a lot in the game. There are a lot of systems going on. There's a lot you can do. You can pickpocket anyone, and it has a little mini game that you have to keep this thing in a bar while you're doing it. And lots of little jobs for you to do. And I've only scratched the surface, but I kind of want to wait and see how it is after an update or two. Maybe them iron to iron out some of the kinks. But I think there is some potential here. Because when I, just to be clear, when I mentioned Postal Games, it's nowhere near that level. It's not politically incorrect. We're going to go super extra and be as vile as possible. And we'll it's not like that. But I think with some time, some iron out, it could be a really fun, silly little time. I would love for that to be the case because I like games like this, and I like sandboxes where I can do a lot of different things and play around. So right now I would say hold off unless you don't mind that roughness. But if nothing else, I think what would be very, very important for them is to, I don't know how important, because I still don't know how many people actually own Steam Decks. And I'm curious if Steam Deck owners are more inclined, I would love to know the attach rate for Steam Deck. If Steam Deck owners are more likely to purchase games than non-Steam Deck owners, if they're people who are always looking for new experiences, because I feel like that could be the case, or it could be an instance of there may not be a lot of Steam Decks out there, but people who own Steam Decks like to buy games, and especially those smaller indie games that make sense for handheld. Because looking at this game, it feels like it would be so good on the Steam Deck, which is why, as someone who doesn't really use their Steam Deck for new games, I was most excited to try it out on there, and sadly, it is not functioning as it should just yet. But with time, it is definitely a game I will be keeping my eye on and looking at. So, but even without the Steam Deck, I was like, oh, I'll check this out on PC. That tells you something at the very least, because I'm not a big PC player, but I looked at this and I said, this could come out on consoles at some point. And when that is the case, I usually decide, I will just wait for that to eventually happen. And if it doesn't happen, oh well. But with this game, I said, I want to see what this is about. And I think even with its jankiness now, there could be a place for it in the streaming community, because silly things will happen, like the thing spinning around and other crazy physics. So maybe check it out. Check out the Steam page and see what it looks like for yourself, and decide for yourself. But just know it's rough around the edges right now. But that is, again, It's Only Money, and that is going to do it for this here episode of the Pixelated Sausage Show. Once again, I am Marcus Nez. Y'all can find me pretty much everywhere at PX Sausage. If you enjoy this here show or any of the stuff I do and what have you, you can support me and my nonsense over at patreon.com/PXS. There you can get access to a monthly Q&A, some fancy Discord roles, a private Discord channel, random drops on the Patreon, and maybe the return of this sausage thing I talked about at the top of the show, and more depending on your tier. That is, again, patreon.com/PXS. In addition to the Patreon, you can find links to the site, the YouTube, the Discord, and so much more over at pxsausage.com. That is it. That is all. As always, thank you for watching or listening. I hope you enjoy this here episode, and I hope you have both a wonderful rest of your day, a lovely rest of your week, and a wonderful weekend. But for now, adios, arrivederci. Bye bye. It's go time, go daddy. It's go time, go daddy.